Welcome to Heartline Stories. Today's story follows a millionaire CEO who gets a shocking call from a foreign number. "Hi, Dad. Can you pick me up, please?" What happens next will leave you speechless. As the CEO tries to uncover the mystery, he's thrown into a world of secrets and life-changing revelations. Who is this mysterious child, and what's their connection to him? Stay tuned as this story unfolds in the most unexpected way. Let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. John Matthews was a successful billionaire CEO. He had everything he could ever want: a huge mansion, expensive cars, and a private jet. But despite all his wealth, there was one thing he didn't have: someone to share it with. He spent most of his time at work, trying to build his empire. His days were busy and his nights were quiet. One bright afternoon, as John was preparing for an important meeting, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" he answered, not sure who was calling. "Hi, Dad. Can you come pick me up, please?" The voice on the other end was soft and unsure. John froze. His heart skipped a beat. He had no idea who the voice belonged to. Was it a prank? "Who is this?" he asked, trying to stay calm. "It's me, Lauren," the voice replied. "I'm at the bus station. Can you come get me? Please." John's mind raced. He didn't have a daughter named Lauren, at least not that he knew of. He checked the caller ID again, hoping it was a mistake. But the name on the screen just said Lauren Matthews. How do you know me?" John stammered, confused and a little worried. There was a long pause on the other side of the phone. I don't know how to explain. Can you just come? I don't know where else to go." John was filled with a mix of confusion and concern. His life had always been predictable. He knew where he was going, and things always went according to plan. But now, out of nowhere, he had a mysterious person claiming to be his daughter, asking for help. "Where are you?" John finally asked. "At the bus station on Maple Street," Lauren replied. Without thinking much longer, John grabbed his keys and rushed out of his office. His mind was spinning with questions. Why was she calling him? Was she really his daughter? What did this mean for his life? As he drove toward the bus station, John's thoughts ran wild. He remembered his early years as a young man. He'd been focused on building his career and never gave much thought to starting a family. He had never married, so how could he have a daughter? And why was she reaching out to him now? When he arrived at the bus station, John scanned the crowd. It was a small, quiet place with only a few people waiting for their buses. He walked through the station, looking for any sign of Lauren. Then he saw her, a young woman in her early 20s, standing by herself with a backpack, looking lost and uncertain. She was looking down at her shoes as if she didn't want anyone to notice her. John's heart raced as he approached her. "Lauren?" he asked softly. The girl looked up. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of hope and fear. She nodded. "Dad?" she whispered. John took a step back. She really did look like him. The same brown eyes, the same shape of her face. But how could this be possible? "Are you really my dad?" Lauren asked, her voice trembling. John felt his throat tighten. "I think so. But I don't understand. How could this happen?" Lauren looked down, her face filled with sadness. "I don't know how to explain it. I'm just trying to find you. I've been looking for you for years." John stared at her, his mind still spinning. "Where have you been all this time? Why didn't you tell me you were alive?" "I didn't know how to find you," Lauren said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "I was adopted. I only recently found out about you, and I didn't have anyone else to turn to. Please, Dad, I need your help." John stood there stunned. His mind was racing with questions. He didn't know whether to feel angry, confused, or protective. But one thing was clear. He couldn't just leave her here, all alone. "Come with me," John said, his voice soft but firm. "Let's talk." They left the bus station and headed toward John's car. Lauren climbed into the passenger seat, her hands still trembling. As they drove, John couldn't stop thinking about all the questions that raced through his mind. How had this happened? What kind of life had Lauren led without him? And most importantly, why was she reaching out to him now, of all times? "Tell me everything," John said as they drove toward his mansion. What happened? How did you end up in that bus station? Lauren hesitated before answering. It's a long story, Dad, but it's time you knew the truth. There's so much you don't know about me, about us. John felt a chill run down his spine. What was she talking about? What truth was she referring to? As they drove into the night, John couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change forever. John glanced at Lauren, her eyes full of uncertainty and sadness. She sat quietly in the passenger seat, looking out the window as if trying to gather the strength to speak. I know this is all a lot to take in, Lauren finally spoke up, but I really need your help. I can't go back to where I was. John kept his eyes on the road, but his mind raced. What do you mean? Where were you? Who raised you? Lauren took a deep breath. It's complicated. The people who raised me weren't my real family. They adopted me when I was just a baby. They said they were trying to give me a good life, but things weren't always easy. John's heart softened as he listened to her. He had so many questions. How had this girl ended up in such a situation? Why had she never reached out to him before? Why now, he asked, his voice softer. Why come to me now? Lauren's face grew pale and she twisted her hands in her lap. Because I found out the truth. I found out that I'm your daughter. And I need you. I can't do this alone anymore. John didn't know what to say. He wanted to believe her, but it felt too unreal. He had always thought of himself as alone. He'd never thought about having a child, especially not one he had no idea existed. As they pulled up to his mansion, Lauren looked out at the grand entrance, her eyes wide with awe. This is where you live? John nodded, but he didn't feel proud. Yes, it is, but it's just a house. What's important is what happens next. The massive doors opened as they approached, and John parked the car in the driveway. Lauren stepped out, her eyes still taking in the luxury of the place. But something in her eyes told John that she wasn't impressed by the riches or the mansion. She seemed more lost and scared than anything. Come inside, John said gently, leading her into the house. As they walked through the grand hallway, Lauren's gaze wandered. She seemed so small in this giant place. John couldn't help but feel guilty. If only he'd known she existed all those years. They sat down in his sitting room, and John turned to face her. Okay, Lauren, I'm listening. Tell me everything. How did you find me? Lauren sighed, her shoulders slumping. I've spent my whole life trying to find answers. My adoptive parents didn't know much about where I came from. I always felt like there was something missing, like I didn't belong. She paused, her eyes filling with tears. I found out who you were a few months ago, but I didn't know how to contact you. It's been so hard trying to put all the pieces together. John's heart tightened as he watched her struggle to keep it together. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But you found me now, and I promise you, I'm going to help you. We'll figure this out together. But Lauren didn't seem entirely comforted. She wiped her eyes and looked at him with a seriousness that made John uneasy. I need to tell you something else, she said, her voice trembling. There's something about my past, something that might change everything. John's stomach dropped. What could she be talking about? Was there more to this story than he'd ever imagined? What is it? He asked, trying to stay calm despite the rising tension in the room. Lauren took a long breath before speaking. I found out who my real mother is, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. And she's someone you know. John stared at her in shock. What? Who? Lauren hesitated, then spoke again, her words carrying the weight of a revelation. It's Rebecca, your ex-girlfriend. John's breath caught in his throat. He had known Rebecca years ago. They had been in a relationship before he became too focused on work and other things. He had no idea that she had been pregnant with his child, and he certainly hadn't known about Lauren. You're telling me Rebecca is your mother? John asked in disbelief. Lauren nodded, her face tense. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't know how. John's mind raced. Rebecca was a part of his past he hadn't thought about in years. The idea that Lauren was his daughter, Rebecca's daughter, was too much to process in one sitting. How had he not known? How could Rebecca have kept this from him? As Lauren looked at him, waiting for him to say something, John could only think of one thing. He needed to find Rebecca. There were too many questions now, and he had to get answers. But one thing was clear. His life was about to change, and he had no idea where this shocking new reality would take him. "I need to speak to Rebecca," John finally said, his voice firm. "We need to get to the bottom of this. I can't let you go through this alone." Lauren nodded, grateful but still unsure of what would happen next. John couldn't help but feel the weight of everything he had to face. But one thing was for sure. His life had turned upside down in a matter of hours, and nothing would ever be the same again. John stood up from the chair, his mind swirling with confusion and disbelief. Lauren was his daughter, Rebecca's daughter, and everything he had ever known seemed to be changing right before his eyes. "Lauren," he said, his voice quieter now, "I know this is all a lot to process, but I promise you, we'll figure this out." Lauren looked at him, her face a mix of hope and fear. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. John ran a hand through his hair, thinking hard. "First, I need to contact Rebecca. I don't know where she is right now, but I'll find her. We need answers." As John grabbed his phone, Lauren sat back in the chair, hugging her knees to her chest. Her expression showed how overwhelmed she was. John could see the pain in her eyes. She had come all this way, thinking she would find some answers, only to be faced with even more uncertainty. He picked up his phone and started to dial Rebecca's number. It had been years since he had last heard from her. The phone rang, and his heart raced with every passing second. Would she even pick up? Did she know about Lauren? What was going on? The phone clicked as it was answered, and a familiar voice spoke on the other end. "Hello? Rebecca?" John's voice trembled slightly. "It's me." "John." There was a long pause. "John?" Rebecca's voice seemed distant, as if she was trying to process hearing from him after all this time. "Why are you calling me now?" "I need to talk to you," John said. "It's important. It's about Lauren." Rebecca's voice immediately shifted to something more guarded. "Lauren?" she asked, her tone flat. "Lauren is your daughter," John said, his voice growing firmer. "She's here with me. She's telling me everything." There was silence on the other end of the line. John could almost hear Rebecca thinking, trying to figure out what to say next. Finally, she spoke, her voice shaky. "I didn't think she would ever find you." "Why didn't you tell me?" John asked, frustration beginning to rise. "Why did you hide her from me?" Rebecca sighed heavily, and John could almost hear the burden she was carrying. "It wasn't like that, John. I didn't want to hurt you. But it wasn't just about us anymore. There were other things going on. Things I wasn't ready to face myself. I was trying to protect Lauren." John felt his frustration slowly turning to confusion. Protect her from what? "I could have helped." Rebecca's voice softened. "I wasn't sure you'd want to help. And after everything that happened between us, I didn't know how to bring her into your world. I didn't want her to grow up in the shadow of a world she didn't belong to." John felt a pang of guilt. He had been so focused on his career and personal ambitions that he had never truly understood Rebecca's struggles. "I'm sorry, Rebecca, but now that I know the truth, I want to be there for her. I need to be there for her." Rebecca was quiet for a moment before speaking again. "I know. I was wrong to keep her from you, but you need to understand, things aren't as simple as they seem. Lauren's life, her real life, is far more complicated than I ever told you. There's a lot about her past that still needs to be uncovered." John's mind began to race again. "What are you talking about? What past?" "I can't explain everything right now," Rebecca said hurriedly. "But you need to be careful. There are people who know about Lauren, people who have been looking for her, and if they find out she's with you—" The line went quiet and John felt his heart skip a beat. "Rebecca, what do you mean? Who's looking for her? What have you gotten us into?" Rebecca's voice became urgent. "I'll explain everything soon. But for now, don't trust anyone. At least not until we can talk face to face. It's not safe." Before John could respond, the call ended, leaving him standing there with his phone in hand, staring at the screen in disbelief. "What just happened?" Lauren asked from across the room, looking at John with wide eyes. John let out a slow breath, trying to gather his thoughts. "We need to be careful. Rebecca's saying there are people who might be looking for you." She didn't give me much more information, but I have a feeling this is only the beginning. Lauren looked more confused than ever. What do you mean, people looking for me? I don't understand. John shook his head, unsure of how to explain. I don't know yet, but it sounds like there's a lot we don't know about your life. We'll have to figure it out together. A feeling of unease washed over him. What had Rebecca meant by her warning? And who were these people who might be after Lauren? Suddenly, the front door opened, and one of John's security guards walked in. His expression was serious. Mr. Jameson, we have a situation. There's someone here to see you. John's heart skipped a beat. Who? The guard hesitated for a moment before speaking again. It's someone from your past. Someone who claims to have information about Lauren. John felt his heart race as he turned toward Lauren, who looked just as confused and nervous as he felt. Who is it? He asked, trying to stay calm. The guard didn't answer directly, but gave him a worried look. They say it's urgent. They want to speak with you and Lauren. John's thoughts swirled. Could this be the people Rebecca had warned him about? Or perhaps someone with answers? He had no idea what to expect, but he knew one thing for sure. He needed to protect Lauren at all costs. He nodded at the guard. Bring them in. A few moments later, a tall man in a dark suit entered the room, followed by a woman who seemed much younger. The woman's eyes locked onto Lauren with an intensity that made John uneasy. She looked familiar, but he couldn't place her. The man stepped forward first, extending a hand to John. Mr. Jameson, I'm Thomas Drake, and this is Olivia. He nodded toward the woman, who stood silently, her expression unreadable. John shook Thomas's hand, still unsure what this was all about. What's this about? Who are you? Thomas glanced at Olivia before speaking again. We're here because of Lauren, he said, his tone serious. We know who she really is. John froze. What do you mean? You know who she is? Thomas nodded slowly. Yes. You see, Lauren is not just your daughter. She's the daughter of a very powerful family, and there are people who have been searching for her for a very long time. Lauren's face paled as she took a step back. What? I don't understand. I'm just a regular girl. Why would anyone be looking for me? Olivia spoke up, her voice calm but filled with urgency. It's not that simple, Lauren. Your real family has been hiding you for your safety. Your birth parents have connections to people who, well, they're not exactly people you'd want to cross. John's mind was racing. What are you talking about? What do you mean, real family? I thought Rebecca was her only mother. Olivia sighed, clearly weighing her words. Rebecca isn't the only one involved in Lauren's life. Her biological father, he's someone very high up in society, a person of great influence. John felt the weight of her words. Why didn't Rebecca tell me? Why didn't she let me know? Thomas answered this time. It was for Lauren's protection. There were enemies who would have used her to hurt her father. The situation was far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. Rebecca made the hard choice to keep her away from everything. Lauren turned to John, her voice shaky. So, I'm not just some ordinary girl. No, Thomas said softly. You're the daughter of a billionaire who has enemies, powerful ones. And now that people know you're alive, they'll stop at nothing to find you. John swallowed hard. The weight of the situation hit him all at once. He had to protect Lauren, but how? How could he shield her from these unknown dangers? He turned to Lauren. We'll figure this out. I promise you. No one will hurt you. I won't let them. But as he looked into her eyes, he wasn't so sure anymore. This was much bigger than he could have ever imagined. And as Thomas and Olivia left, John's thoughts were filled with one chilling question. Who were these powerful people looking for Lauren, and how far would they go to get her? The story was far from over, and John knew that soon, everything about his life and Lauren's would change forever. Thank you for joining us on this Heartline story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Remember, sometimes the biggest surprises come from the most unexpected places. Stay tuned.